Good afternoon. Welcome to the Lightning Talk session this afternoon. My name is Matthew Gross. I'm with the Alfresco training team department. And we're going to start here in a second, but I thought we'd go over real quick how this works. So we're going to have 5 speakers here. Each talk is 5.5 minutes. Each slide is 15 seconds, and they're advanced automatically. There is some visual cues, as you can see, and I'll get Harry Peak up here. Sorry about that. Please hold questions to the end. Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Harry Peak. I'm one of the product managers here at Alfresco, and I've got responsibility for search, analytics, and intelligence. And I'm going to try and do a bit of a whistle-stop tour through what are sort of priority themes within that area, what are the new things you're going to see in product coming up, and a bit about how we can work together. I work with the search and discovery team most of the time. Michael from the team is also here at DevCon, so do waving there. So do grab him if you want more technical questions, or talk to us if you want any more detail afterwards. We'd love to chat about this stuff. We very much work across the platform, so we're also collaborating with other teams, so with the RM guys on governance analytics, with the apps and ADF people about embedding our capabilities within those apps, search for process, and so on. So I'll be talking to all of those. And really, there's 4 themes that we're working on. How to build a single technology and service for search and reporting across the platform. How to enable you to quickly build those capabilities into your apps using the ADF and AI-driven intelligence. And I'm pleased to introduce a new product we're launching this year called the Alfresco Insight Engine. This builds on what we've been doing with Search Services and Solar 6 to also create a reporting engine as well as a search engine. So we'll be adding additional indexes for more data, a SQL integration to query the Solar data store and create connections to BI tools you're already using. We'll be bundling a report builder with the tool and adding layers of intelligence over time as well. This is going to sit alongside Search Services as an enterprise add-on. So for those customers who choose to take it, they would replace Search Services and add all those analytics capabilities on top of the normal Solar search that you get. Here's an example dashboard built with that report builder tool. It's based on Apache Zeppelin and lets you build nice dashboards like here, so you can start to explore what's in your repository, who's creating it, who's working on it, what sort of content is it, and so on. Full support for permissions, full support for custom metadata. So here's an example looking at an insurance scenario using that custom metadata. But really, it could be applied to any model to build a report, more for a business type user rather than just admins. First release is in May-June time this year with ACS 6.0, and that'll be focused on content reporting, the SQL interface, and that report builder to give an out-of-box experience. Over the next releases, we'll then be adding in process, usage data, and more. Next, I want to talk about AI, and here's an example of what a customer is doing today with their content in Alfresco at very large scale, extracting insights from the content, applying it back to metadata within Alfresco, and using that to drive automation. And it's really just one of many use cases that we see that could really help accelerate and improve the work around the world of process and governance. And what you're going to see more of us doing is helping you faster get this sort of stuff into your solutions. So we're going to be doing more with open source tools, using Solar more to drive some machine learning capabilities, doing lots more cloud integrations with our partner Amazon. So you may have already seen a reference of doing image tagging of content in Alfresco with our recognition service. We've recently extended that to do a similar sort of thing with text documents, extracting the entities, applying that as metadata back into the repository. And that's available now, and there's going to be lots more of that sort of thing coming. Quick word on ADF. So this is an early design of faceted search being shown in ADF components. Something else we're working on at the moment. We're also going to be looking at query builders and basic visualizations. And so here's the summary roadmap. So just a few things I want to sort of flag up. At the moment, we've got an early access for that Insight Engine product that's coming. So if you'd like to start to have a look at it, start to evaluate it for your needs, please get in touch, and we'd love to make that happen. Then you've got the releases I mentioned earlier of adding more stuff into the Insight Engine, including process coming up. And at the same sort of time, we'd be doing process search via Solr and search services. ADF we're working on at the moment, so you'll start to see those roll out within the monthly ADF releases, and same sort of thing with intelligence. So those recognition and comprehend references of those integrations are available now. Please go and have a play with them, and there's going to be more and more of that sort of thing coming. And I just want to finish on, working with us. Roadmaps like that are very much influenced by conversations we have with people like you. So I'd really encourage you to talk to us about the sort of problems you're trying to solve, what your priorities are within reporting and analytics. Even if you want to contribute or collaborate on stuff, maybe if you're thinking about a solution, we can help guide on how it fits in with what we're doing, what demand we see from customers. We'd love to talk about all of that with you. Thank you very much.
So I think before the slide changes, I can start. My name is Axel Faust. I work in a small one-man company by myself as a consultant, and I want to talk about some important workarounds for making as multilingual. Now, when I talk about as, I don't mean a specific body part of a human body, and I don't specifically mean the ability, for example, of the greatest pet detective of the world to talk out of his ass in multiple languages. I'm talking about Alfresco search services and making it usable in a mixed user local environment. Mixed user local environments are something that are very common, especially in Europe, because we have to deal with multinational corporations, multinational organizations, as well as cross-border and language employments, for example, between the EU and Switzerland, like in areas Germany, Switzerland, and France. And usually it's the way that the organization has standardized on a specific content locale, but the user is still free to choose their own user operating system or browser locale. The problem arises with S and multilingual user cases is because Alfresco uses a browser locale, so the user locale, when a node is created, to associate it with the node and the content. And this locale is used for indexing that content. During query time, however, the locale of the next user is used for tokenization of the query. So if we have multiple users with different locales uploading documents to Alfresco, they are stored with the locales of the user. The same when a process happens, it's stored with the system locale. Now, if an Italian user actually queries for these documents, he will not find anything with the current as version because the tokenization of those index values is based on locales of the original user. So this is a problem for for multi-local user environments. The problem, the background of the problem is historically Alfresco with Lucene, Solr 1 and Solr 4 used to index and query languages or values both in a current locale as well as an all locale. So even if you didn't match the specific locale, you were still matching the all locale. This has been made configurable in 5.1 to be able to configure suggestible identifier as well as cross-locale properties in the shared properties file within Solr. And for a long time, there was an empty config delivered with Solr, which meant that there was a fallback back to the legacy functionality, which meant that text, ML text, and content properties were still being indexed and created as cross-locale properties. Unfortunately, with Solr 4 in Enterprise 5.2, as well as with Solr 6, which is the basis behind Alfresco search services, there's now a non-empty config, which means that the default no longer applies. And we only have one cross-locale property, CM name, and everything else is just locale specifically in search. The reason for this change is basically Alfresco wanted to improve the performance and scalability of the search system to reduce the size of the index for larger repositories and optimize it for future use cases. Alfresco Search Services was released end of 2016, and it did take a while for it to be noticed that in cross-local environment it didn't work as expected. I played around it in April of 2017, and around August of 2017 other parties joined in, like Angel Boroy with Keensoft in España. And of course there was some confusion in the beginning of how to deal with this. And also some excessive aberration because we've been fixing some multi-locale issues for a long time. So what are the workarounds? Well, one workaround is to actually do a brute force configuration of Alfresco search services to reconfigure the default to be the default of previous Solr 4 version, which means specifying all of the identifier and cross-locale properties specifically. The other workaround would be just to configure the properties that you need for your specific use case in shared properties. So not enabling the data type as multi-locale, but the specific properties. This results in a smaller index and faster search, but requires that you know your model quite well. Or you can use explicit query locales with the search parameters, either via the Java API or the REST API, where you can say, okay, I want to query in those specific locales, German, English, and French, because they might be my main locales. There's also an option to specify a wildcard locale, which means search in any locale that you find. Don't care about the specific locale. Of course, the results of stemming and tokenization might not be perfect, but you would get a lot of we would actually get results. In terms of looking for long-term solutions, my initial feedback to Harry was that DTEX properties should be treated as locale independent by default, and only if a specific administrator configured them, they should be treated as locale specific. Then when Axel joined and opened the Alf issue in Jira, there was a bit of increased community awareness, and we finally sat down with Harry and Andy via a Skype session and discussed what the community needed. And fortunately, this was marked with success, and now we have an issue in Jira planned, Search 684, which is specific to DTEX properties, so metadata, and re-enables or aims to re-enable the previous Solo 4 default, and adds aims to add another options for index and query time. The target currently is tentatively for Alfresco Content Services 6 or Alfresco Search Services 1.2, but again, anything can change. So I hope to see it fixed in the future. Thank you.
So hello everyone, and welcome to my lightning talk. I am Dennis Koch, a member of the Alfresco expert support team, and I'm working with Alfresco products since 8 years now. In my following slides, I'm going to show you how to set up an Alfresco Process Services extension project. The motivation behind this talk was to provide you with the fastest way to implement your extensions, but also to answer some typical questions. So, for example, what requires you to set up an extension project? How is the project set up? How do I actually work with it in my favorite development environment? How do I build and install the extension? And is there anything else I should tell you? Let us look into the first question. Why would you need an APS extension project at all? Well, the most common use case is that you want to execute some custom logic as part of a process, for example, in a Java service task. A second use case would be extending our default REST API and adding your own endpoints to it. If you are interested, especially in that use case, I recommend listening to my other lightning talk tomorrow about the API's REST API. A third use case would be implementing one of the many different offered interfaces in APS. So for example, you could tweak the activity process engine used in APS by implementing the process engine configuration configure interface. Another use case would be the implementation of a custom identity synchronization provider and the related authentication. So for example, you could sync in users and groups to APS from any other external source, like a text file. So how is the project now actually set up? Well, there are quite a few prerequisites that have to be fulfilled. So you have to have Oracle JDK installed and Apache Maven installed, and you need to have set the related environment variables accordingly. As the project is Maven-based, you also need to be able to pull the APS dependencies from our Nexus repository. Our enterprise customers can raise a case in our portal, and customer care will provide them with the required credentials. To set up the project, create a project directory and give it a reasonable name. In that directory, create a POM XML file and define some required metadata, like the artifact ID, the group ID, or the version of the extension. Next, you would define the group ID and the version of the actual APS dependencies to pull. Also, you would have to set the Java version that should be used for compiling. And this must be 1.8 for all current APS releases. Our POM file then also needs a dependency section where we configure the required APS artifacts and general artifacts. Also, we will need a build section to tell Apache Maven to filter and substitute variables in resource files. Last but not least, you will need to define the actual repository URL from where the project will pull the APS dependencies. Remember to store your credentials for that repository in your Maven settings XML file. After finishing the POM file, you can then start setting up the actual project structure by following the Maven standard directory layout. So you will add a source folder where you will add your packages and classes to implement, and you can add a test folder to implement unit tests. The folder structure there might look different depending on your actual requirements. So if you want, for example, to implement a service task, you would extend the package com activity extension bean, whereas if you want to extend the REST API, you would need to extend the package com activity extension REST. Now, how do you work with that in your favorite development environment? Well, you could have done all the steps in the IDE before because they support Maven, or you could import the project. To build the actual extension, you just need to run the mvn clean install command, and the output will show you what is happening during the build. So you should see all the defined metadata from your POM file being used, and you should see the dependencies being downloaded. When the build completes, you will either see a build success or a build failure message. In case of failure, I recommend reviewing the error closely, as it should tell you what went wrong. You can then go on and correct the issue and just run the build once more by running mvn-install. In case of success, you will end up with the actual extension library jar file in your target folder. You just have to copy it over to Activity App, Web and Flip, and have to restart the APS deployment to make use of the extension. The project, as demonstrated, is really sought as the quickest starting point to implement your extensions, as there is currently no SDK for APS. Alfresco SDK offers an experimental feature to even run APS from within the project using a Maven profile, but this is not officially supported yet. So follow the SDK channels closely for future updates. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Caruana. I'm from Australia. I'm one of the expert support engineer. I'm going to talk about choosing a point of implementing a customer searching method. I've handled a number of cases from customers who had a performance issue with their customer searching codes. I've found out through my experience about how each method works, what the differences are, and what method should be used from a performance point of view, which must depend on what your requirements are. Basically, we have 3 types of searching methods. Yep. The first one is a getChildAccess method, which actually runs as a database select query, which is a canned query predefined in the node common XML file. The second one is a transactional metadata query, such as FTS and CMS, which is also performed by database query. The third one is index search using Soda, which runs as an index search. We always recommend our customer to use an index search for searching rather than from the database. This is from Alfresco's architecture point of view. Since we share only one database, the database will be busy when we search against the database, especially if we search from on the Alfresco instances. On the other hand, we can have multiple Soda instances, which is good to split out the user's access amongst it. Although some customers' requirement is to get the content straight away, right after the contents or metadata are created or updated. But as you may know, Soda isn't a transactional indexing, so there will be a delay change to be reflected in the indexes. Thus, we can't retrieve content straight away using Soda. This is the reason why some customers don't want to use Soda, and instead they want to retrieve contents performed by database query. It may look like there are not many differences between the getChildAccess method and a transactional metadata query. But there's one main difference we need to be aware of. The getChild access is actually a node service. Otherwise, it's not a search service. This means it's not a dedicated method for searching contents. Since all the other node services are using it, we can't tune the predefined canned query for a specific customer searching purpose. You may be aware of it, but there's actually two types of getChildren canned queries. The first one is a standard one, which normally used for the tree view and document list on CA document library, but it retrieves way too many information than you want, such as user and group permission, like ACL ID and ACL transactional ID, and changes it, which is the reason why it takes longer. As for the second one, which is used for the CA customizer dashboard, for example, which retrieves only node reference, which seems reasonable, so some customer wanted to use it. But as you can see in the next page, the corresponding code snippet, it will run only when there's no metadata properties attached to the contents, which is rare, but we can't tune it for your specific customer searching purpose, since all the other functions are using it. Yeah, this one. The getChildren canned query always searches child node recursively, including all the permission, even if it doesn't need it for your customer searching all the time. Compared with this, FTS query is a flexible query within the searching contents and metadata. As it proves, I took database traces when I ran some FTS queries. The first one is the trace output when I search the CM content. The second one is when I search an aspect. As you can see, those queries are effectively using the QNAME of CM contents or aspects. I recommend you use FTS query instead of using the getChild access method. If you want to search content in the subfolders recursively using FTS, we can do it with path query like this. Thank you for the time for listening.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Caruana. I'm one of the founding engineers at Alfresco and the architect for content services. I'm a developer at heart and I love creativity. So I thought I'd talk about why creativity is important and how you can best improve your creativity. So this is Steve Sasson. He looks pretty pleased with himself, and so he should. This photo was taken in 1975, and he's holding his own invention, the first ever digital camera. However, it was never taken to market by his employer, and that surprisingly was Kodak, for fear that they were going to destroy their existing film-based industry, their revenue. And that was a real shame for them. So we can see that innovation is vital for company success. And we talk about innovative companies, Google, Tesla, Apple, but really innovation comes from you. It comes from your creativity. And it's the role of the company to either hopefully encourage that or potentially inhibit that. Last year I was at the Google offices in London, and this poster was on the wall in the toilets. I admit I felt slightly uncomfortable taking my phone out and taking a snapshot. But it was the first evidence I've seen of Google actually encouraging creativity. And it says, think of a problem, gather a team, and come up with a great solution. And at Google, we make ideas a reality. And I think that really strikes a chord with me. So if creativity is so important, how do we actually improve our creativity? As an engineer, I'd like to understand how these things work. And fortunately, somebody already had worked out how creativity works. And this was way back in 1926, a guy called Graham Wallis. He wrote this book, The Art of Thought, and he outlines the steps for creativity. And the first step is all about research. It's all about accumulating knowledge, planning and setting the appropriate frame of mind. And then the next step is incubation. And this is my favorite step, because basically you do nothing. You can sit back, you can look out the window, you can go for a walk. But what you're really doing is letting your unconscious thoughts process all of that research. And hopefully you'll come to that eureka moment. It's the moment of illumination. This is where we gain insights, we make some connections, we come up with a new idea. This is where we're actually creating and innovating. And those ideas tend to be fuzzy at first, they're fuzzy at the edges. So the final step is called verification. And this is where we take those ideas, we validate them, we crunch them, essentially we reduce them to an exact form. So I've come up with some of my own hacks on how to improve creativity. So the first one is feed all you can. Feed your creativity. Read books, follow blogs from individuals and companies, but make sure that you read a diverse set of subjects and from a diverse set of views as well. The second is scribble. I've resorted to carrying around paper and pen. I just jot things down, moments of inspiration, I draw diagrams. They don't have to be perfect, but maybe one day you'll go back and from that you can create your masterpiece. This is probably the most important, embracing diversity. Share your ideas with others who probably aren't like you is probably best, because they'll have a different reading list, different points of view, and that can spark creativity. And finally, take some time to write your ideas down. Put them in documents. This will force you to clarify those ideas and test them. They may not come to anything immediately, but others may down the line get some inspiration from those. Now, Gartner places us here on their magic quadrant. We're doing well in execution, very well, but there's a slight improvement there that we can make on the completion of vision. So there's plenty of opportunity for all of us to stretch our creativity and innovate. Many companies are using or adopting open innovation. Lego, for example, they like their fans to submit their own Lego designs. And at Alfresco, open innovation is a core value and a real strength of ours. And that really comes from the fact that we have great diversity in our community. I mean, if you look around you now, you can see that diversity. So we should all make use of that. And we all have an open and standards-based platform on which to experiment. Our digital business platform is continually evolving, so that allows us to quickly iterate and test. And also we can do that out in the open as well. We can do that in an open source environment. And finally, creativity is best driven when we have problems to solve. So despite claims of ECM's death, content management is nowhere near done. There's lots of challenges in the cloud, AI, etc. And finally, I'd like to just recognize that there are lots of different roles during the creativity process. And if you're being a critic, just be sensitive and don't destroy the seeds of creativity. It's much easier to destroy stuff than create stuff. So now go hack your creativity. Thank you.